I quit drinking 2 years ago and I quit porn in May. It just sort of became, you know how it is. It's just like something like, oh my God, that's gross. And then like a month later, it's not that bad. And then you're into that. And then you move to the next room.
Yeah.
And it just keep going down Dante's Inferno.
Since coming out as a child sexual abuse survivor, I have gotten off of weed and then porn. It took a long time for me to realize and admit to myself that these were the very tools my abuser used to groom and brainwash me at age 14. On this episode of Inverted World, I will tell you how I overcame the psychological barriers that stood in my way, the realizations I've had since stopping cold turkey 7 months ago, and the catalyst that led me to deleting my library of porn.
I was addicted to porn. I know, billion-dollar industry, just me, right?
Porn use is one of the most misunderstood addictions, which is one of the reasons why there is still so much societal stigma around it. And psychologists find, surprisingly, porn addiction has very little to do with sex at all. My porn addiction, I believe, was a mix of being exposed to it at a very young age and a spiral of shame, hatred, and guilt that I had towards myself because of years and years and years of being raped by a 65-year-old man. Finding forgiveness for my younger self and coming to the realization that I was coerced into keeping a secret that wasn't mine to bear were only found in my sobriety, which leads me to believe that porn acted more as a toxic alleviant for the pain that I just simply didn't want to deal with. Dr. Kanoja, more known by the name Dr. K, is a licensed psychiatrist who earned his medical degree from Harvard. Here's what he had to say about it.
So the first thing that's really interesting is that people who are addicted to pornography oftentimes get exposed at a very, very young age. We're talking about first exposure to pornography like prepubescent most of the time. Pornography usage will suppress a lot of negative emotions. And if you talk to people who use pornography, especially in an addictive way, what leads to usage is like feeling bad about yourself. And this is the big problem with pornography usage, which is that once you start to use it, it sort of engenders more shame and guilt. And in order to deal with the shame and guilt, you have to use it again. It's just the kind of thing where if you like think about the societal stigma, if someone's like, yeah, you know, like I grew up and I was addicted to alcohol, like, and now I'm sober for 20 years. And it's like, good for you, man. And it's like, yeah, I'm a recovering pornography addict. And it's like,
he later brings up research that did a multivariate regression analysis on people with porn addiction and found that the number one variable associated with porn usage was a feeling of meaninglessness. In other words, finding purpose is the single most beneficial emotion if one wishes to kick the habit. So having this channel and wanting to make the best possible content for you to help move culture towards an ever more loving and understanding future, those are all huge motivators for me today in my life.
Don't get angry, but I stopped watching porn, but it got to the point for me, and I love you so much, but
Being the best possible partner to my fiance Karu was the catalyst that made me delete my whole library of porn. I didn't want her to feel that she wasn't number one in my life. She never told me not to watch it, she never shamed me, but at the same time, I never exactly felt proud of myself either for watching porn. Is there some utility in it? Sure, I'm all for freedom of expression. And I'll admit there can be some potential educational utility and pleasure attached to it. There's even research that shows when porn is introduced to a community, it does cause the rate of sexual crimes of men upon women to go down. But the question remains, is it still optimal for you? But it is also important to be wary of the technology around us hacking the mental pleasure circuitries, which have many losing control and not even know or see it happening. Chris Williamson argues, yes, porn does prevent men from misbehaving, but it is also sedating them.
There's something called young male syndrome, and what that refers to is typically in a society where there is a surplus of young unmarried men, you get instability. Nearly 1/3 of the population of men between 18 and 30 having had no sex in the last year, probably more now. Why hasn't young male syndrome kicked off? And one of the potential reasons for this is that men are getting fake cues of fitness signaling from porn and video games. Porn is giving them a very, very small titrated dose, but sufficient to keep the sexual desire at bay. So you could look at the men that are kind of being lost by the wayside at the moment as not going out with a bang, but instead going out with a fizzle. They're being sedated out of misbehaving. And a really difficult question to ask is, would you rather have miserable men that are sedated or capable men that are causing havoc?
So it's kind of helping in some way.
It's providing a function. And
an outlet.
And the question is, does it net a benefit? And they're going to make less good partners, but they're significantly more stable.
I want to be the best possible partner for Karu. She deserves it, and for me, it's taken me out of this spiral of shame and guilt, which personally I needed to get out of, especially given my trauma of sexual abuse.
Wait, how bad was your problem, Steve?
It wasn't that it was bad. It was that I didn't like what pornography was doing to my mind. It was a progressive thing as far as I remember younger. This is before the internet, like him having like a DVD. You had he had a whole like collection of them, and I would take one or two, and then
How many? 3.
you could have filled up like an Amoeba record, like a whole store.
What was the reason that you quit?
Well,
what was the moment?
Well, I realized that it affected just my relationship.
Sex life?
Yeah. Or it just kind of like, it not only desensitized me, like as far as, because I noticed too, like when I was like I would be on Pornhub or X videos, my searches would be a little bit more further, like going kind of outside the box, you know?
Like what? Give us an example.
Well, it started with just like POV doggy or, you know, something like that. Or, you know, cream pie or, you know, just like your, I don't know if that's standard.
That's running the mill.
Okay,
Run of the mill.
but then it started going into like crackhead cream pie. So I realized when it progressed to that, I'm like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
I don't like what I've become.
Mary Harrington, a British writer and commentator, has these 3 laws of porn dynamics. 1, the law of expansion, where porn tends to lead one to wanting increasingly extreme or diverse forms of content to satisfy them. 2, the law of diminishing returns, which is where you experience less pleasure over time. And 3, the law of psychological entropy, meaning prolonged exposure may lead to a state of disorder or chaos in one's emotional or mental well-being, which may lead to feelings of emptiness, disconnection, or dissatisfaction. In fact, in this interview that I did with undercover journalist Arden Young, she exposed Pornhub employees saying they engage in questionable marketing tactics where they purposefully push LGBT content to straight viewers in order to expand marketability.
Try to push stuff that's less accepted, like putting a trans male or a trans female in a scene. You wouldn't get that on a normal mainstream site. So test it out. See if you get a bigger audience with it. See if you can convert somebody, right?
If you're interested, I put a link to that interview in the description below. Neuroscientist Andrew Huberman says if you train your brain to get aroused by watching other people have sex, you're training your brain not to get aroused by performing the act, but by watching it, which is a setup for potential issues down the road. I don't think it's meant to be a spectator sport.
When you start watching porn, it's like any porn will do. It's like, they're naked. Ooh. Then later on, now you all f***ed up. And you need a perfect porn cocktail. I'm good now, man. I had to go to rehab, get the porn patch. I'm a lot better now. Ladies, it's like, take care of your man. Fellas, take care of your wives, your girlfriends. Take care of her, or she will leave you. She will leave you either physically or mentally.
Now this comes to my last point, which is sex happens in the mind. The need for entertainment and pleasure, like anything, is a reflection on what's going on inside. When pleasure in any form becomes compulsive, whether it's porn, weed, alcohol, social media, pick your poison, right? They're all ways to hide from consciousness or push and suppress emotions that you don't want to face. I used porn to escape the pain of fatherlessness, the fear fear of being unlovable, of being abandoned, and the fear of the haunting sexual acts of my abuser. There are many reasons to run away, but it doesn't solve anything. In fact, it exacerbates with time. Learning to take ownership of what's going on in here, especially when everything out there is vying for it, is the difference between life and death.
That's one of my biggest arch nemesis is pornography.
Why?
Because it just weakens me. Yeah.
How so?
I put all my sexual, my fantasies and stuff, they're not mine anymore. They live, somebody created them better than my imagination can. And if it's not mine, I think, then I don't value it as much. I get used to watching the sex and seeing it and not having to be engaged with my actual feelings or anything. So then I see it and I still get all the joys out of it. I don't have any of the feelings attached to it. So then when I am engaging with somebody that I care about or something, it just doesn't calculate for me emotionally as well. I think it should be shut down, man.
For real?
Yeah, because I think it's killing a lot of, I think it's harming a lot of men, man. I really do.
Do you think that booze should be shut down? Should we make booze illegal? Because that's killing a lot of men too.
No, but I think eventually we'll kind of evolve out of booze as it's not something that, it's not the hip drug that it once was.
Yeah, but it's still a social lubricant.
That's a good point.
I see a lot of people who believe that porn should be made illegal, but I have to say I lean towards treating people like adults, letting them decide for themselves what they want to do. We definitely need to crack down on underage content and abuse and equip people with the knowledge to make the right decisions for themselves.
There was a couple things that I just watched on the whole sex industry. What do they call it? Human trafficking. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of contributing to this.
Yeah.
So, not getting preachy here. So
the stigma attached to this addiction is an indication that it is a deeply misunderstood addiction. And my hope is that people do not further shame people who still struggle with it. It is now possible to look at more beautiful nude women in one day than any man in history has ever seen. Is that a net positive for those who produce it, for those who consume it? I can't say I believe it is. In this unprecedented time in which we all live in together, the ability to substitute the false for the real, the artificial for genuine, and the virtual for what is most authentic has never been so real. The solution will be found within, finding the emotional source of whatever compulsion that ails you. And I promise you, when you do, you're most of the way there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, thanks for watching Inverted World.
He had a whole collection of them, and I would take one or two, and then
How many? 3. You?